Imagine, you wake up in the morning, step outside, and you get arrested. For what? For holding a salmon in a suspicious manner. It sounds like a joke from a comedy, but this is a real law that was in force, and formally still is, in the United Kingdom. And believe me, this is far from the strangest example you'll hear today. Imagine a law that makes it illegal to die inside a parliament building. Imagine a tax you had to pay just for wearing a beard. Imagine a trial where the main defendant was a pig, complete with a real lawyer and a real verdict. None of this is a screenwriter's invention. This is real human history. Sometimes funny, sometimes chilling, but always revealing just how strangely people understood justice in different eras. Laws are a mirror of their time. They reflect the fears, superstitions, economics, and logic of people who lived hundreds or even thousands of years before us. And sometimes that logic looks completely insane to a modern person. Today we're going through the 10 most unbelievable laws in human history, from ancient Athens to the Russian Empire. Get comfortable. This is going to be interesting. Let's start with that very fish. In the United Kingdom, the Salmon Act formally exists, the Salmon Act of 1986. One of its provisions reads almost like a joke. It is illegal to handle salmon in suspicious circumstances. What exactly counts as suspicious? The law doesn't specify in a single word, which means that, in theory, a police officer could detain you simply because the fish in your hands looked somehow off. Too fresh for that time of evening, too large for your bag. Who knows what else? In reality, the law was created with serious intent to fight poachers who illegally caught salmon in rivers and then tried to sell their catch. The wording was meant to give police broad powers to investigate suspicious fish trading. But what came out of it is what came out of it. A law that regularly appears on lists of the most ridiculous legal provisions in the world and remains legally enforced to this day. So if you ever find yourself in London holding a salmon, smile with confidence. In ancient Rome, there was a color that was dangerous to wear: purple. This deep crimson-violet shade of clothing was reserved exclusively for the emperor and the highest nobility. Wearing a purple toga without permission was a crime that could be punished by death. Where did such severity over an ordinary color of fabric come from? It all comes down to cost. The famous purple dye, Tyrian purple, was extracted from the glands of sea snails called murex. To produce just 1 gram of dye required processing roughly 10,000 mollusks. The process was long, foul-smelling, and incredibly labor-intensive. Entire coastal towns existed solely to produce this dye. As a result, purple literally cost more than gold, gram for gram. That's why it became a symbol of absolute power. To afford this color meant declaring a status equal to the emperor's. And Rome was not in the habit of forgiving such declarations. This law regularly appears in collections of the strangest British laws, and it states exactly that. It is illegal to die inside the Houses of Parliament. The logic attributed to this rule sounds almost absurdly bureaucratic. If a person dies on the grounds of a royal palace, an old tradition automatically entitles them to a state funeral. And that is expensive, complicated, and creates an enormous organizational headache for the crown. So, according to legend, anyone who fell seriously ill within the walls of the Palace of Westminster would, whenever possible, be carried outside as quickly as possible, so that, formally, the death, if it occurred, would happen outside the building. It sounds absurd, but it's exactly these kinds of stories that turn dry legal provisions into urban legends that live on for centuries and are still retold by tour guides outside the Parliament walls today. Imagine a government deciding The more windows you have in your house, the wealthier you must be, and therefore, the more you should pay. That's exactly how the authorities of England, France, and several Italian states reasoned when they introduced the window tax. The idea seemed logical. Windows were expensive, and their number could easily be counted from outside the house without entering or assessing the property, convenient for tax collectors. But the townspeople responded with truly human ingenuity. They simply started bricking up their windows, whole streets, whole floors at a time. And this measure had very real consequences. Physicians of the era recorded a rise in illnesses linked to the lack of light and fresh air in homes, where people deliberately deprived themselves of windows to save money. Even today, in many old European cities, in Edinburgh, in London, in provincial French towns, you can still see facades with bricked-up window openings. This is not an architectural quirk. It is a tax revolt frozen in stone, more than 300 years old. In ancient China, looking directly into the emperor's eyes was considered a mortal insult. The imperial court had an entire ceremonial code devoted to how one must properly avoid looking at the Son of Heaven. Subjects were required to prostrate themselves and lower their gaze straight to the ground. Even the highest officials, who had spent years close to the throne, kept their eyes fixed on the floor in front of them during audiences. Behind this lay not just a matter of etiquette, but an entire belief system. A direct look at the emperor was thought to be an attempt to steal a fragment of his divine power, his connection to heaven. Violating this rule could be punished by immediate execution, without lengthy proceedings. Interestingly, similar rules in various forms persisted in China for centuries, even hundreds of years later. Foreign envoys arriving at court faced strict ceremonial requirements that seemed bizarre to them, while for the Chinese themselves, they were the very foundation of world order. And now, one of the darkest episodes in our collection. The so-called ugly laws. From the 1860s until the early 20th century, several American cities, Chicago, San Francisco, New Orleans, and others, officially enforced ordinances that prohibited people with visible physical disfigurements or deformities from appearing in public places. The wording in the municipal codes was bluntly direct. A person whose appearance might be considered unpleasant or offensive to passers-by was subject to a fine or could be sent to a workhouse. In practice, these laws hit the most vulnerable hardest: war veterans who had returned with severe injuries, people with disabilities, and the homeless poor, effectively criminalizing poverty and disability themselves, putting them outside the law simply for existing on the street. The most well-known of these laws in Chicago was not officially repealed until 1974, meaning it overlapped with the lives of people who could still tell their grandchildren about it today. In the 16th century, Venetian glass was one of the most valuable goods in Europe, a true high-tech product of its time. Because of this, the glassmakers of the island of Murano lived under a special, almost caste-like regime. On the one hand, the Republic showered them with privileges. Glassmakers' daughters were allowed to marry into the nobility, something unthinkable for any other craftsman of the time. But these privileges came at a colossal cost to personal freedom. Glassmakers were forbidden to leave Venice without special permission. If a glassmaker fled abroad and began sharing the secrets of production with competitors, his family left behind in Venice could be taken into custody as hostages, and the fugitive himself was officially declared a traitor to the state. According to legends of the time, the Republic sometimes sent hired assassins after particularly valuable defectors. In essence, the Venetian Republic owned these people as a living state secret, long before the modern concept of industrial espionage even had a name. In ancient Athens, under the lawgiver Solon, there was a law that directly forbade idleness. Every free citizen was required to have a definite occupation and, if necessary, be able to explain to a court exactly what means he lived on. Those who could not give a clear answer to this question were held legally accountable. Idleness was treated almost as an offense against society itself. There's a bitter irony in this. Western democracy itself, along with the very concept of civil rights and freedoms we still use today, was born in Athens. But the right to simply do nothing, the right to idleness, had no place in this system. Work and visible public usefulness were not merely a virtue. They were a legal obligation for every full citizen of the polis. In 1698, having returned from his famous Grand Embassy through Europe, Peter I introduced a tax on beards. The logic was simple and harsh. If you want to wear a beard, you pay. The rates varied sharply depending on social status. A peasant paid a modest sum right at the city gates, literally a kopeck at the checkpoint. But for the nobility and wealthy merchants, a beard cost tens and even hundreds of times more. After paying the tax, a person received a special copper token, receipt engraved with the inscription, "The beard is a needless burden," along with an image of a mustache and beard. This token had to be carried at all times and shown on demand, or the beard could simply be shaved off forcibly on the spot. This was just one detail of a far broader reform by Peter aimed at the Europeanization of Russia. The Tsar wanted the country to look Western in a literal physical sense, and for many conservative boyars, parting with their beards became a genuine personal tragedy, since at the time a beard was considered an almost sacred sign of piety. And finally, the most unbelievable one, the reason it was worth watching this video all the way to the end. In medieval and early modern Europe, animals were officially put on trial in court, following the full judicial procedure. Pigs, bulls, goats, rats, and even caterpillar pests were summoned to appear, formally as a symbolic gesture, of course, assigned an official defense lawyer, and ultimately handed a full court verdict. One of the most famous cases took place in 1386 in the French town of Falaise. A pig was accused of attacking a child and sentenced to death. The execution was carried out entirely in public, in front of the townspeople, and the condemned animal was even dressed in human clothing before the execution mortuor to symbolically uphold equality before the law. The famous French jurist Bartholomew Chassenet became renowned in the 16th century for professionally defending rats accused of destroying crops in court, securing them postponements and reduced sentences following every procedural rule, as if they were human defendants. Why did such trials exist at all? Jurists of the time genuinely believed that the law was universal and had to extend to every living creature in a world created by God. If a creature committed an act that qualified as a crime, it had to be punished, regardless of whether it possessed reason or not. Today this looks almost comical, but behind it lies a quite serious philosophical idea from the medieval worldview. Order and justice had to encompass absolutely everything in creation, without exception. And that's all. 10 laws that truly make your jaw drop. But look closer, and these aren't just amusing curiosities for a trivia collection. Each of these laws is a small window into how people of different eras understood justice, power, fear, status, and order in the world. The beard tax tells a story of tradition clashing with reform. Animal trials speak to a belief in the absolute universality of law. The ugly laws reveal how easily a society can legalize cruelty simply by calling it order. Every era creates laws that seem completely logical and necessary to the people living in it. And future generations look back at them with bewilderment, and sometimes with horror. Which naturally raises the question, which of our laws today will 500 years from now seem just as strange to people of the future as the window tax or the ban on looking at the emperor seems to us now? If you found this interesting, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. In the next video, we'll dig into ancient civilizations' technologies that were centuries ahead of their time. It's going to be just as fascinating. See you on the Incredible Facts channel.